Okay, here we go. All right, so talking about how we channel this information. For me, I channel several different ways. When do you all need notebooks? Do you need notebooks?
I have one.
Okay. When I go into the records, I'm in the records just as right now I'm in this room. However, because we work with different senses when we're working with spirit, being in it can take different forms, and we'll be learning about that later today. When Bill works with the records flow through him. Now, unlike Lowell when he channels, where Lowell like basically steps aside, or Erin when she channels, they step aside. Bill is fully cognizant the entire time. He has stepped aside to allow the Akashic Records to flow through him, but he is awake and aware the whole time. But like most of us, when we channel information, if you ask him like 2 months later, oh, when you channeled for me, blah, blah, he's like, that was not my information to keep, so he won't necessarily remember it. The only time he would remember it is if there's some outstanding information that's a lesson for him for his growth. And we'll...
But when he channels, let's say when is it in your specific Akashic record keeper, or is it generically Akashic?
No, it's your specific.
Okay.
So like when he did a reading for me the first time, it was so funny. You know, he's talking about, oh, the pain, the horror, the pain, the horror. And I'm like, I think I'm kind of like, what? But he was on the mark because he tapped into not my whole records and all my lives, but the specific part that I really needed to work on at that point in my life for my personal growth. And what he tapped into was the roughly 10,000 years that I spent as a soldier and, you know, a ne'er-do-well, mostly in the Orient, China, Japan, running around just killing. And then once in a while, to balance it, I'm like, okay, the next life, I'm going to be a pitiful little farmer who's like, farm gets razed and like destroyed and his entire family like raped and killed in front of him, just to like balance out. Okay, now I get to kill again. But I love the camaraderie of being among the soldiers. Like, to me, that was the ultimate family connection. To me, all these strangers who had no one, or people who left their family, you know, like, and then joined with this. Like, to me, the most wonderful thing was when you had someone who had to leave their wife and children wherever to come and join because for whatever reason someone wants to invade somewhere. And at first they're like sad because they got like basically forced to become a soldier. But then when they realize this is their new family and they relax into the energy of it, to me, that was like the best thing. And I still have like memories where we're sitting there doing sword practice together. And, you know, oh my God, it's like, you know, it's no small wonder that I own like so many knives, right? Like I own well over 100 knives. But again, I'm a chef. So, but it's no small wonder I became a chef. I got to play with knives and fire and hang out with smelly men who were like, you know, just being guys. Like, so Bill, like, I'm sitting there, I feel good about life. My life is great. I remember my last few lives where I was a healer and I was when I owned an fruit orchard, and then he's like, the horror, the pain, so much pain. And then he does these sound resonances and throat clearings that are meant to like help heal, similar to how Gary Nicky does. And I was like, why does that feel familiar? And you know, why? Because I don't like what he's saying, but it felt very familiar. And at that point, then the memories of these lives over the next few months really started coming forward. And I had a lot of synchronicitous situations that caused me to work with this energy and learn to release all of that darkness that was carrying with it. And that's when I found out why, like, when really super intuitive healers would want to do like an exchange. So I work on them and it's all like awesome. Then they work on me and they start crying. It's so much sorrow. How do you live with it? And I'm like, I just feel like me. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Warrior, lots of pillaging, raping, plundering.
Uh-huh. Yeah. That's why part of me kind of cracks up a little bit when someone's complaining about their life in the here and now and how, like, I mean, none of us have had like unpleasant things in our lives. You know, we've had like times where love is denied or we're taken advantage of. But, you know, compared to those lives, we all got it pretty sweet. So when someone comes to like, why would anyone choose this life that I have? Like, how dare anyone say I did it to myself? I'm like, not that bad. You got both your hands, you know. You know, you have not been flogged regularly since you were a child. Like, not as bad as some lives you've had. So yeah, Bill's work with you, like, I guarantee over the next year, things will still be coming up from that. Because it's, I feel like his work is almost like it starts unraveling threads. So it's, while he's very dramatic in the presentation, the work that I do usually has a more immediate big effect, but the work he does, it's like a slow boil. Like a year later, you're like, oh, that's what he was talking about.
He described it as more of a
right.
Yeah.
But there's still things that you're like, oh, you know. Like, it took me a while to really figure out why all these things were coming together, why people were horrified at all the pain and sorrow that was in my heart, and why a friend of mine who wanted to show me what access bars was like, even though I always like stay away from access bars, which, I mean, I'm fine with access bars, but for me, my guy just said, don't do it. And a friend said, oh, let me try it on you. I'll show you. It'll just be a little light thing. I was like, okay. And she did it. I went out and she was like working on me for like 2 hours. And I thought it was like 10 or 15 minutes. And I was upset with her. I said, why would you do that without telling me? She said, there was so much black. I was trying to get it out of you. And so she did that. And for 8 days, I could not sleep. I did not sleep a wink for 8 days.
Oh my God.
And I was like going a little nuts because I had to do a road trip with my son and I really needed sleep. So I went to Nanette and she got Jesus and Archangel Michael and Metatron. And, well, she didn't. They're the ones who came forward. And it was crazy. Like, I was lying there and she was working on me. And I said to her, I'm on a ship in the ocean with Jesus, Michael, and Metatron. And she said, open your eyes. And I did. And my whole body was rocking back and forth like that.
Oh my goodness.
And then later I went like stiff as a board. My whole body rose up several inches, like 6 or 8 inches, and fell back down. And they totally, I could see they were just like flushing me through, like they were putting a spigot of water in my head and water was flowing through, and then I slept great.
Wow.
Yeah. So all this time I'm like, what was all that black she was pulling out of me? And then why does everyone cry when they touch my heart? And then after working with Bill, that started the path for me to realize, oh, that black is me. The black she was pulling out was me. And that's why she couldn't get it all out, because she was literally pulling me out of myself. And so, like, that's why I couldn't sleep.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was bad.
Well, it was
Well, how could
it was my soul. I had a lot of black in my soul. And when I came into this life for the work I'm doing in this life, I agreed to bring everything that needed to be healed from my entire existence into me in this life to heal. And I'm still in that process, although we've done a lot. Like every time I think, oh, well, I'm like 99% healed, I'm like, well, that's like 99% of a lot. There's still plenty there, but we've gone much further. So that's why I didn't know any different. If I always had all this pain and sorrow in my heart, then for me, feeling happy is happy while weighed down by pain and sorrow. But I'm still like pretty happy person. So since working with Bill and over the last year, I've done a tremendous amount of healing of that. So he kind of, with his work, he opened the door for me to see how things that had already happened and things that were happening to fit in there. And so it wasn't just a one-shot healing. It was like the beginning of a tremendous amount of healing that happened at just the perfect time for me to work with this, to go forward with my life. Now, so are Bill and I contracted in this life to meet at this time, or did my body and soul just know, okay, now is the right time for you to pursue this, and there, with that one, it doesn't really matter because, the right situation happened at the right time. But since then, I've seen a lot of dark stuff coming out of my heart. I'm like, okay, you can heal. Now go be happy. And they're like, really? I get to do that now?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few pretty dark deaths of mine. So that's one thing that I want to start with. When we access our past lives, we're already more connected than we think we are. We've all had times in our lives where things seem weirdly familiar, even though you don't know why. We've had times when you have a reaction to something and you don't know why. And there can be many reasons for that. But like for me, every time I turn on the garbage disposal in my kitchen sink, my whole life, even when I was a kid, there's a part of me that has a compulsion to stick my hands in there. And then something says into me, no, not in this life. Mm-hmm. So I used to, when I was a child, think that I was like maybe a little schizophrenic or something. Mm-hmm. But then I realized somewhere in some life, my hand got cut off. And, that happens to quite a few of us, especially if you spend 10,000 years in war.
I always want to jump out of a window.
There you go.
Window. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so somewhere in some, yeah.
Keep on passing open windows.
Exactly. And I, like, every time I see a helicopter, I'm like convinced someone's going to get their head cut off. I'm like, well, obviously scimitars have cut off heads both on me and me on others in lives, because that's every time I see a helicopter and that, all I see is like scimitars cutting people's heads off. And like, oh, I must have had at least one life where that was like my favorite way of decapitating people in war.
These movies go back in the past.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be doing some of that today. And we've had times like when I was a child, we were in Mexico, and we used to go there quite a lot when I was a child. So we were in Yucatan, and we were in the ruins, Chichen Itza and Uxmal. And there was, we're in one ruin, and they have, those great next, the pyramids that they have that are all stepped up and you can climb. And in those days, they would have like a chain running down, and that's like the safety line. You climb all the way up this like massive pyramid with these like crumbling steps by holding onto a chain.
You mean now or
When I was
way
a
back
child.
when?
So
Oh,
this was
okay.
like 40
Yeah.
years ago. So we're, and they have these cisterns in the middle of these pyramids, and they're like big, massive holes that have like the ocean goes actually through pipes, tunnels, like natural. So you actually have ocean water there. Yeah. And that's where they would like throw sacrifices. And generally you would have like, and they also had freshwater cisterns. So you generally had like one cistern that was for sacrifices and another one that was for water. So you don't want to like get your water where the dead
No.
bodies are.
Probably would know.
Yeah. But these were natural holes. And they would have like little paths where you could climb down, walk down the edge, and they'd be like that wide. Yeah. So we were in these ruins, and the guide, my family was always too cheap to hire a guide for like $10 for the day. You have someone, so they would just like, but you had all these guides there that like people would pay, and so my parents would just bring us stand near someone. Oh my god. Exactly. I mean, mostly my parents just didn't want some person hanging out with us all day and they thought this was more fun. So we're hanging out near someone, and they were talking about how in the jungle, someone asked, like, we see the one sacrifice cistern here, where's the fresh water? And they said, oh yeah, that's in the jungle, but you have to know how to get there. It's dangerous because you have to, it's like in there. And I went, I know how to get there. And I walked straight into the jungle. Okay.
When you were little?
Yeah, I was like 13 or 14, I think, at the time. Yeah. So 14. So I walked straight into the jungle, and my family went running after me. And this guide said to people, let's go. We can't let that family wander straight into the jungle. So I wandered straight in with this crowd following me. And I found it was like an animal path. It was like so subtle that it would, and with all the overgrowth, it would be easy to lose it. And I did not pause for a beat. I just walked deeper and deeper and deeper into the jungle. And then suddenly there was this giant hole in front of me, like the size of this building, huge. But you wouldn't see it with all the overgrowth unless you were there. Like, I think even an airplane flying over would have trouble seeing it. And there we were. And they ran behind. And the guy's like, how did you know this? And I said, I think I was here. And then and I said, but there's a path to get down. And he said, no, please, like, it's a miracle that you got here. And I went wandering. I'm like, here it is. I was like, went about a third of the way around. I'm like, here it is. And I went right down. And it was like, it was, like, it was narrow enough that you had to be careful, but not so narrow that it was dangerous. And we went down into this cistern, and we drank from it. And I was like hit with all these visions of me as a young girl coming here to gather water, and it was like, it was really something. And then when we got out, the guide said, I've actually like never been here before. And I said, that's okay. And I took us back, and it was like the whole thing, we were maybe an hour tops. But so these past lives, like, we feel like, oh, we're going to go into the Akashic Records. They're already in us. Yeah.
I was employed, and I've had many following about a month ago, and I was having breakfast, and it was cool and sitting inside, and all of a sudden I could feel the chill, and I could smell of the rusty smell of the tin. It just it's so it was
Mm-hmm.
it was so real.
Yeah, exactly.
You feel the weight. So
Exactly. That's fantastic. Wow. Um, okay. So I'm going to close the door a little bit. So glad the three of you are here today. Me too. Right. So I'm going to start with a little presentation. And
you said there was different forms. Like
mhm.
you said that all the records flowed through them, but
Well, for me, I go into like I am physically in the records. Um,
what?
yes, yes, and we're going to do that today. That's a classic Linda Howe. Hi, that's great. We're just getting started. Nice. Hi. You can sit anywhere, and throughout the day, we're going to be sitting and lying down and brought my blankie.
Oh, so this is what
Yeah, we're going to start with her, um, her kind of style. Yeah, because she's really a classic side. I'll explain to you the dishes. I never heard of her. Oh yeah, she's like this is Akasha. She yeah she.
what do you think of this Lisa and
I don't know her. Lisa, I do not know her, but okay. There's a lot of people I don't know. Excellent. Okay. That name sounds familiar, but they're my guides keep telling me to stop spending so much time researching others and spend more time just working with what I know and what I do. So um, they keep giving me all this great information. And I'm like, I'm going to go read 5 books before I follow them. They're like getting a little frustrated with me. So, okay, everyone has 4 sheets. I pay for Linda Howe and then 3 for me. Reading your personal records, tips for accessing and claiming your special. Okay. Um, so I want to make sure when you watch the video, you will. Okay, so that's 23 minutes. We're done so far. We're going to start.